hold up, Joe. Joe, hold up. Best way to do that. Best way to do that.
Mr. Kilgore?
Yes, ma'am. On Friday, we served a subpoena on Detective Stoddard for some information that he received from the FBI, specifically a binder that was provided to him in 2015, labeled Hypothermia, Child Deaths and Vehicles, a Review of the Literature. And we're requesting that be that subpoena be honored and that material from his file be turned over to us this morning for review. We've never seen it.
Yes.
And Your Honor, I believe that the notebook was turned over to me. Detective Stoddard does not have that notebook here. I've had it for probably a year or so. It's from the FBI Behavioral Analysis Group. All they did was print off basically for the prosecution regarding defense experts and things of that nature, literature regarding deaths in hot cars, and some newspaper articles and things like that regarding one of the defense experts and things of that nature. It is not a statement of a witness. It is not anything under the statute that is required to be turned over whatsoever. Detective Stoddard did not rely on it in any way in interviewing witnesses or anything like that. It's not a statement of a witness. It's basically just some research that was compiled by them for our assistance in dealing with a possible defense expert. Obviously, we're not asking the defense to turn over materials the defense has, or they've Googled or reviewed or printed out themselves for review to cross-examine our witnesses. Further, we're not expecting their experts or witnesses to have to turn over everything they've read, period, and things like that. So, Judge, this is not discussed. I think he tried to get it via subpoena process. Detective Stoddard doesn't have it. I told him for these purposes, though, we could use my copy depending on what Your Honor's ruling was. But there is no. I think this is a slippery slope, and if we end up trying to acquiesce into turning over something like this that doesn't fall under the discovery statute, I don't want to go down that road. And so I don't believe it is discoverable whatsoever under the statute.
Judge, according to the discovery material that we received, there's a report from Detective Stoddard that on November the 5th, 2015, he had a meeting with the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. And he received information from them. He had previously provided them information about the case. Then he met with them, and they provided him with a binder. I don't know what's in that binder because we haven't been provided. It hasn't been given to us to review. But this isn't material that was prepared by the district attorney's office. This is information from law enforcement, from another agency that Cobb Police sought out to assist with the case. That makes it part of the case. That makes it part of their investigation. There's a report on it. It was material received. And I don't believe merely by saying, well, he doesn't have physical custody of it anymore. He doesn't have physical custody of anything. And when we get to trial, the DA's office has got all the evidence. So this is part of their investigation. It is not merely something that an expert has gotten together. And so I think it's real clear as part of their case that they've got to turn it over to us, Judge. And I would ask that you require them to do so at this time. It should have already been turned over to us.
Your Honor, as an officer of the court, I can tell you there's no statements of witnesses or anything like that. What I've said is what's in there, is in this notebook. Again, I think Brandon versus the state's a recent case that's come out in the past year about what is required of the discovery statute. They actually talk about even detective notes possibly not being subject to the discovery statute because it doesn't fall under one of the things that is delineated. And this is way far afield from that. So I haven't heard anything about under the statute how this fits into one of the things the state is required to turn over.
Well, I'm not going to require the state to turn over the information. Anything else before I sit for jurors?
No, Your Honor.
No, ma'am.
Read the jury.
Let's all rise for the jury, please.
ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you. Hope you had a super weekend. The weather was certainly, yes, not for us, for y'all. But it was beautiful down here. We're ready to resume the trial case. Detective Stoddard has been called back to the witness stand. I would remind you that you're under oath, Detective. You can resume your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good
How are
morning,
you?
everybody else. Detective Stoddard, we had, I think, stopped off after viewing a video of the defendant and his wife together in an interview room, or in one of the interview rooms, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. After that interview, I believe we see you taking the defendant back to a holding cell, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, at this point, I know you previously in the interview we saw, you told him he was going to be charged with something like cruelty, a felony, based on his acts, but you were going to have to talk with other people about it and things like that and figure out where you were, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. After you took the defendant back to the holding cell there at headquarters, did you sit down and kind of powwow with other people in your office?
Yeah, after we got done, after I had placed him back in the cell, we went and I met with my supervisory staff, Lieutenant Farrell, or Captain Farrell now, Sergeant Tommy Knowles, Detective Stockinger, and myself. We all sat down in the lieutenant's office and we went through the evidence in the case and what we thought appropriate charges would be.
And at that point, had you been the one interviewing every witness and talking to everybody and things like that, or was this kind of a group effort?
It was a group effort.
So when you talked through the facts of the case as you had them at that point, what did you decide? What was the decision made about what charge to take out against the defendant?
At that time, we decided to charge cruelty to child in the first, which is, deprivation of the substance, which would be water, air conditioning, something that caused the child's death. He wasn't given it, the child died. And
Now,
thus,
let me ask you a question about that. Now, that particular charge about necessary sustenance, did that require in any way the element of malice or anything like that?
not at all.
Okay. This was just basically because the child had been left in the car and been, as you knew it at that time, deprived of sustenance.
Exactly.
Okay. After the decision was made, did you inform the defendant of this?
I did.
Okay, now before you informed the defendant of this, what were you guys going to do with the defendant that's basically you do in all cases where there's an arrest or something like that, as far as documenting him physically?
Every time there's an arrest, especially somebody that we have at the office, the subject is photographed. It's just a photograph of what he looked like at that time, when he's leaving the office, any characteristics that we need to know about, clothing and such and so forth.
Now, who was going to assist in doing that and taking the photographs and things of that nature?
I asked Detective Racy, he is another detective in the office. I asked him to photograph the subject for me.
And what was he going to utilize to photograph the subject?
We all have cameras, like a little Canon camera. They can do video, they can do photographs. He was going to use his one that had been issued to him from the county to take the photographs.
Okay. Now, sitting here, have you reviewed a ton of reports in this case and statements and things like that in preparation?
I have.
Okay. Do you remember every little thing that everybody told you now, even having reviewed those just independently?
I do not.
Okay. Is that why you do police reports?
And that's why.
Okay. In this case, generally speaking, did you do a police report on everything that was done that you were actually present for?
No.
Okay. Tell the jury how that would go about if you were involved with other officers and things like that.
We kind of pair the work up. And so if myself and another detective watch an interview, later on we decide who's actually going to do the report for that interview. And we also do that with other things such as taking photos of a vehicle or taking photos of the defendant. We were both in the room at the same time. Detective Racy had less to do in this case than I did. He went ahead and did the report.
Now, have you actually had to testify in a couple of hearings over the course of this since the arrest of the defendant?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Okay. And back in 2015 at some point, did you talk about this, the issue of photographing the defendant and things like that?
Correct.
Okay. Now, initially then, did you remember exactly whether the photographs were to be taken before or after you came in to tell him what the charges were?
I did not.
Okay. What did you think at the time?
At the time, I thought that Detective Racy hadn't even started. I was not sure whether he had taken the photographs before. I had happened to be walking by the room. I saw that he was in the room. I was carrying a coffee, my water for the Keurig, to go fill it up. And then you can see it from the video when I entered the room, or when I'm sitting in the room. I wasn't sure when the photos had been taken, whether he had already taken the photos that we talked, or whether I stood there and watched first.
And after you were asked questions, were you shown a police report, and did that refresh your memory?
It did.
Okay, so were the photos taken to the defendant before or after you actually came in and told him about the charge?
They're taken before.
Okay. I'm going to show you, well, let me also go back before we get to that. We saw in the video, did you see there was a moment where something was thrown into the trash?
Correct.
Okay, what was that?
It was a Publix receipt.
Okay, and was it recovered?
It was.
Okay, and was this, looking at the video, was that receipt thrown away before you got the timeline and you started asking the defendant questions about his day?
That's correct.
Okay, when was it, before or after?
Before.
Okay. Show defense counsel what a mark for identification purposes is State's Exhibit 430. All right, detective, I'm going to show you what a mark for identification purposes is State's Exhibit 430. Ask if you recognize that, looking at the contents as well.
I did.
And how do you recognize it?
It's a crumpled up receipt that was given to me by Detective Waltmore that was recovered from the trash can in the interview room.
Okay, and is that the same or similar condition as when it was presented to you in this case?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibit, excuse me, I already forgot, 430 at this time.
I guess for whatever it's worth, we're going to object to it.
Admitted.
And so, the receipt, just tell the jury what the receipt is for, the time and the date of the receipt.
Oh, the receipt's for a 3-piece chicken tender combo. It says or CB, sweet leaf tea. It's purchased from checking, $7.82 on 6/18/2014 at 11:54.
Okay. All right, now, going back, Detective, to the photographing of the defendant and things of that nature, have you reviewed and did you see the photographs regarding of the defendant as how he looked in the interview room, basically as you had seen him earlier when you interviewed him and then later when you spoke with him?
That's correct.
Shown defense counsel in State's Exhibits 432 through 436. Detective showing you State's Exhibits 432 through 436. Ask if you recognize those, looking through them. Look up at me when you're done reviewing them. Do you recognize those?
I do.
And how do you recognize them?
It's photographs taken of the defendant. It appears to be the photographs taken by Detective Racy after the interviews have been completed.
And was that before you had actually came back in and tell him what the charge was?
That is correct.
Okay, and those fairly accurately depict how he looked that evening at the headquarters.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibits 432 through 436.
My only objection would be, I don't know how that's relevant. That's my picture.
All out over objection.
And Detective, just tell the jury, first of all, I'm just going to publish these just briefly. 432, 433, 440, oops, excuse me, 34, 435, and 440, oops, excuse me, 34, 435, and 436. Now, detective, just tell the jury generally why are photographs taken of the defendant in jail before you take him into custody and things like that.
In case anybody at a later time comes up and states that the defendant looked a certain way, if you want to match up photos to a video, surveillance videotape from the scene, if there's any evidence that later on, like you saw a speck of something, a mark, whatever, just to document how he looked before he went to the jail.
Now, after he was photographed, at some point you did come into the room.
I did.
Okay. And did you tell him, what did you say to him at this time?
I informed him of the charges that we had decided.
Did you question him in any way?
No.
Okay. When you told him what he was being charged with, did you discuss the elements at first or anything like that?
I did not.
When you did, what was his response to you?
When I sat down, I charged him. I told him about the cruelty to child at first and also about the felony murder charge. He then said, well, there was no malicious intent.
Had you said anything about that at that point, about the word malicious intent?
No.
Okay. Detective, at this point, when the interview was done with defendant and everything, was the initial interviews and with Leanna, do you usually cut the interview recording process off?
It takes up a lot of space on the recording. It's audio visual or audio and the video, and it's two different camera angles. So when we're done, it's cut off. So it got cut off after the defendant exited the room, and it got cut off after we took the defendant back after he met with Leanna, and we took him back to the cell.
And do you remember how long it was between the time that you took him back to his cell and then the time you brought him in for photographs at all?
We're going to say probably about less than 2 hours.
So do you know exactly how long it was?
I don't know exactly.
Okay. When you go in and inform him of his charge, were you expecting to get any kind of interview or anything like that?
No.
Now, Detective Racy, did he actually, when the defendant made that statement about there was no malicious intent, did he activate anything?
He did. Detective Racy was standing there when I sat down to speak with the defendant. When he made that comment, Detective Racy activated the video on his camera and then videoed the rest of the interaction, I would say, between myself and the defendant.
And have you reviewed the video what was captured on the audio and on the camera as far as you can tell? Have you reviewed it to see if it's accurate?
I have.
Your Honor, showing defense counsel with a mark of identification purposes of the state's exhibit 431. Detective showing you state's exhibit 431, do you recognize that?
I do.
How do you recognize that?
It came out of the case file copy. It's a copy of the disc stating that suspect photos video, Detective Stoddard, Detective Racy, and dated the 18th of June 2014.
And that is a fair and accurate representation of the amount of the interview or the statements the defendant made that you guys were able to capture.
That's correct.
Your Honor, tender state's exhibit 431.
Same objections that we previously made to this evidence.
Allowed it with those objections.
And Your Honor, permission to publish, I've already loaded it onto the Mondo pad. Thank you. Not long.
And in that process of forgetfulness, not really forgetfulness, but of me going there, unfortunately my son passed. It's not like I went to my job and said, I'm just going to leave him in the car. Or I didn't know the grocery store would say, I'm just going to go in for 30 minutes. He's going to be fine, and then it happened. And that's what I see, that's what I personally see cruelty. I meant to harm him, is what it feels like you're saying.
No, your actions caused his death.
How is that against the law? Like in the case of murder, felony murder.
I think we explained it pretty well, Ross. You deprived him of life-sustaining sustenance, which would be, in an air-conditioned, place, or a place where at least he's not in 95, 110 degrees
you for murder say?
Well, I'm gonna let you look that up, so I'm not gonna give you the wrong thing.
Right.
But for felony murder, okay, during the act or commission of a felony causes the death of another. Okay? That's how that works. Doesn't say anything about malicious intent, doesn't say anything about intent. Just says that during the commission of a felony.
I just don't see how such a, I can't really think straight. My son's dead. What can we do?
Well, you're gonna have time, okay? And I already spoke to your wife.
I mean, I don't wanna, I understand that you guys are doing your job. That's completely understandable.
You understand it's not personal, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not sitting here looking at you going, I'm making judgments on you.
Right.
I'm going by what state statute or state law says.
Listen, and I get that, and I get that. But I really am hoping for some kind of, between the magistrate or whomever, some kind of, I can't be in jail for 30 days because I can't miss supporting my family. I can't miss my family supporting me. I can't miss burying the child. I can't do that. I did not maliciously, it's not like that, y'all should hold me from that because.
No, we're not.
And you see what I'm saying?
I don't set the bond, the judge sets it.
And I get that. But do you have some kind of influence that says, hands no priors?
And the judge will be made aware that you're not probation or parole and have no criminal history.
And I have no other children in my care.
No other children or anything like that, he's got to go by state statutes too. I believe with the felony murder, they're not going to give you a bond. You're going to have to wait 30 days to go through a probable cause hearing. After a probable cause hearing, between you, your attorney, and us, and everybody else, they can decide whether they want to do a bond.
I just can't see how.
Let me get that other officer right here.
Detective Stoddard, at that point, was he formally arrested and then taken to jail?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, later on, just go ahead and talk about the charges. Later on, I guess that next week, did you guys amend the charge to make the basis for felony murder a different type of cruelty?
We did.
Okay, and tell the jury why that was. Who did you discuss it with, and what was it after?
We discussed it with the medical examiner's office. He came back with the hyperthermia, the overheating, as a cause of death. And since we had first charged with, deprived of substance, the hyperthermia is more negligence, we went ahead and charged him with cruelty of child second.
And was it still felony murder?
It's still felony murder.
Okay. Now, at that point, was that basically, was the evidence coming in as you were going, I guess the investigation fluid?
Yes.
Okay. And are you learning things kind of as you go throughout these days from other officers, things like that, and from your own investigation?
That is correct.
Now, later that evening, after, or I guess into the early morning hours, did you go out to the car again?
I did.
Okay. Had you actually seen the vehicle at the crime scene?
I saw the vehicle at the crime scene.
And what did you do at the crime scene? Did you get in it or anything, or did you just kind of look at it?
I walked up to the vehicle, looked inside to see where everything was inside the vehicle. I did not enter the vehicle at that time. We were waiting to get a search warrant, and when we get a search warrant in our unit, the vehicle is taken back up to crimes against persons, so I did not enter the vehicle.
When you got to the, I guess, hours later at the shed when the car was being processed, who was processing the car?
That was, at the time, Detective Grimstead.
And was anybody out there when you went there other than Detective Grimstead? Do you
No,
remember?
he was by himself.
When you went out there, did you also, as a lead detective, look around at the car, or now that you had the search warrant, go inside of it?
Yeah, I got a closer look. I actually was able to put my head inside the vehicle.
Okay. Now, when you put your head inside the vehicle, did you notice anything that stuck out to you?
Yeah, there was a follow order inside that vehicle.
Okay. Now, do you remember if you had spoken with Lieutenant Farrell up to this point, or now Captain Farrell up to this point?
I don't recall about, well, I had spoken to him.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember if y'all talked about this issue yet?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Now, when you say a foul odor, what did you associate that odor with?
I associate that odor with death. It's that foul, stale, strong odor that comes from a dead body.
Now, have you in the past used the term, did you ever use the term decomposition?
I have. And when I say decomposition, I wasn't meaning like the gases and everything. I wasn't doing the scientific version. As a detective, I'm not a scientist. As a detective, I said decomp, and it smelled like decomp to me, or death, and I associate the two together. Once again, it's not the scientific version. It's not where the medical examiner would explain to you what decomp is scientifically. It's what I smelled and what I associated with that smell.
So you don't know what the mechanism was that caused that smell?
No.
Going on into your investigation, just what were you doing in these days after the arrest of the defendant? What types of things were you doing as far as your investigation?
Investigation starts, you start at ground zero, waiting for the phone results to come back, waiting for the computer results to come back, and you start with interviewing witnesses. Lots of interviews, some double interviews. Sometimes we'll interview a witness twice. If it's like a quick interview at the scene, there's a lot going on, there's noise, there's stuff, they can't really concentrate. We will interview them a second time to get a better grasp of what they actually saw that day.
Well, one of the, I guess, particular areas you were looking at was that regarding the Chick-fil-A.
Yes,
Okay, and were you looking to obtain information from the Chick-fil-A?
we were.
Now, were you able to, or did you receive any receipts of the defendant's purchases from Detective Escamillo?
I did.
Okay, we already heard him testify about getting them and turning them over to you. I'm going to show you what was previously marked as for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 401. Okay, Detective, I'll just go ahead and leave these out. Showing you what's been marked State's Exhibit 401, first looking at the envelope those were in. Do you recognize State's 401?
I do.
How do you recognize those?
It's the evidence envelope that I put the receipts into, that I put them.
And are those the actual receipts that Detective Escamillo brought back to you from Chick-fil-A regarding the purchases on June 18th, 2014, that morning by the defendant?
No, they're a copy.
Copy.
They're a second copy of the receipts that you brought back to me.
Okay. And are those fair and exact copies of the ones that you received?
They are.
Okay. Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibit 401.
If I could just ask a quick question or two on that, Judge. Chuck, can I see that?
Yeah.
This doesn't have a time that the document was printed. You don't know when this was actually printed, do you?
I do not.
Okay. Do you remember what day Escamillo gave it to you?
I do not.
Okay. Was it within a couple of weeks or a couple of months of June 2014?
The original receipts came in within a couple of weeks. They went into the case file. Those are second set of receipts. They're a copy of those receipts that were given to me from the owner.
Okay. So the owner pulled these, or the owner pulled something like this, gave it to Escamillo, who gave it to you, and this is a copy of what Escamillo gave you?
It's, yes, from the owner.
Okay. These are the actual pieces of paper that Escamillo had?
No,
All right. Do you know where those are?
no, I
Have
do
they
not.
just been misplaced or something?
Something.
You just happen to have made a copy, and so we're lucky that you have a
No.
copy of it.
All right. Once again, the receipts came from Escamillo. I received the receipts. they were put into my case file. During some process of the investigation, the receipts went missing. I got a second set of receipts from the owner, and he said these are the receipts I gave Escamillo. He reprinted them, or he had a copy in his office, I'm not sure which. And he gave me that second set, and I believe that was in April. Is it dated on there?
It's not.
Council? It should say on the back there what date no, on the back of the envelope. It was someday in April. It'll probably also be on the property sheet that corresponds with that.
Okay. All right, I think I understand now. The Escamillo doesn't have anything to do with it. You basically went and got these from Chick-fil-A yourself, April of 2016, just a
Yes,
couple
sir.
of months ago.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
And to the best of your knowledge, these appear to be the same thing that Escamillo had originally given you.
exactly. Yeah, they appear to be exact the same copy. I believe that the owner, I'm not even gonna say, I asked for a copy of what he gave the detective that morning, a copy of the receipts, and that's what I received from him. And it
I don't have
appears
a
to
problem
be,
with it.
appears to be the same receipt.
Plus,
I
it's
would
an
check
evidence.
that.
There's no objection.
Thank you. And Detective, these wouldn't be the hard copy, like printout that the defendant got, like the copies of his receipts or anything like that. This is provided, I guess, like business records from Chick-fil-A, just saying this was the actual business transaction.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, let's see, you guys found, I believe, already been admitted, receipts from the car, Chick-fil-A, and they were found in the center console?
That's correct.
Okay, and how many receipts were there, as best you remember?
I believe 3.
Okay. It's going to be defendants 18. All right, Detective, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what's contained in Defense Exhibit 18. Ask you to take a look at that and look at what was inside, and tell me if you recognize that.
Yeah, there are 3 receipts.
And with that packaging, are those the receipts that were collected from the defendant's car that you guys took into custody?
That is correct.
Looking at, first of all, you reviewed the Little Apron Academy sign-in sheets and things like that, badge access from Home Depot and things like that regarding when the defendant actually would have dropped off Cooper, what days and things like that, correct?
I did.
Okay. Now, first of all, looking at one of those receipts dated June the 11th, 2014.
Yes.
And what is the time that is depicted on that receipt as far as when the receipt was printed, and what does it say whether or not it was a drive-through?
It was printed at 0901, and it is drive-through.
And was that a day that the defendant had actually taken Cooper and dropped him off?
Yes.
Okay. And had Cooper, based on the badge access, had he dropped Cooper off before going to Chick-fil-A that day?
That is correct.
Now, on that day as well, have you reviewed, and you've seen videos in here and then before, regarding the defendant coming into work on June the 11th, 2014?
That is correct.
Now, on that day, after having gone through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru, when he got to work, did he remember to get anything out of his car that day?
Yeah, he got a guitar out of the car.
Okay, and is that the day he's seen on the video carrying the guitar into work?
That's correct.
Now, the other days that those receipts are from, I believe, June the 2nd, okay, is that a day that the defendant had taken the child and dropped him off at daycare?
That is correct.
And on that day, would he drop the child off before going to Chick-fil-A or after?
Before. Oh, wait a minute.
If you were.
He went Chick-fil-A after dropping off Cooper.
Okay.
On that day.
And on June 9th, is that a day that he did not drop Cooper off? Just a different day he went to Chick-fil-A?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, take those back. Now, Detective,
June 6th.
6th, I'm sorry, I said the 9th.
Yeah,
So
And
June
June
6th
6th.
was the day he did not take
Correct.
Cooper to school. Okay.
that's correct.
Now, in addition, where you provided video from Chick-fil-A, from Detective R.B. Smith?
I was.
Okay. And did he tell you, we've heard testimony already, that he checked time.gov and that the video time at Chick-fil-A was about 18 and a half minutes fast?
That's correct.
So reviewing that video, what was the time that the defendant, if it was 18 and a half minutes fast, the defendant entered Chick-fil-A?
Defendant, I'm sorry, actually enters Chick-fil-A at 8:59 and 30 seconds a.m.
Okay. And then, and is that depicted on video, him coming in the door?
It is.
And what time does he actually exit Chick-fil-A?
At 9:20 and 33 seconds
9:20 and 33 seconds a.m.
a.m.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. At some point in your investigation, did you obtain information from the defendant's iPhone 5 regarding messages that he sent via whisper to somebody?
I did.
And you know which one we're talking about, the responding to the post that's, I hate being married with kids and novelty's worn off and I have nothing to show for it.
That's correct.
When he responded, what time was the first time that he actually responded to that post, if you remember?
Looking at my notes, first time he's going to respond back, it's going to be at 8:55 a.m.
So the defendant, as far as his statement to you in his interview, he's left straight from home and went to the Chick-fil-A, correct?
That's correct.
So this is 4 minutes before he gets to the Chick-fil-A.
Correct.
So that would have been while he's in transit to Chick-fil-A.
That's correct.
And just kind of in the same time frame of within the Chick-fil-A, when is the next time that he responds, those next two responses to that post back and forth in this conversation?
Second response around 9:15 and 15 seconds, and 9:15 and 33 seconds a.m.
And the 9:15:33, is that the statement about I love my son-in-law, but we both need escapes?
Yes, sir.
Where would he have been and who was he with at the time when he said that?
He had Cooper in the car with him at that time.
Been in the car or at the Chick-fil-A at that point at 9:15?
I'm sorry, he's still at the Chick-fil-A at that time with Cooper.
And we'll talk later about being in the car. But now, in addition to getting information from Chick-fil-A, were you interested, based on his statements to you, about the route that he took that day and things like that?
That's correct.
Now, when the defendant was talking to you about his drive that day, in the interview that we saw here, after he left the Chick-fil-A, did he talk about any traffic accidents?
No.
Okay, did he say anything about traffic being particularly terrible that morning?
No.
Did he tell you or say anything to you about any distractions or anything that had distracted him out of the norm?
No.
And taking that U-turn, as far as he told you, was that his normal routine, was making that U-turn and going back that way?
Correct.
Now, is that U-turn, is it now an illegal U-turn?
It is.
Okay, back then, was it legal?
Yes.
So it's perfectly legal what he was doing? Okay. Additionally, on this route and the other routes we'll talk about later, from Treehouse to Acres Mill, things like that, did you attempt to see if the Department of Transportation or anyone had street cameras or things like that, and we may hear about in CSI that they're able to get and track? Did you check for that type of stuff?
We did.
Okay. Were you able to ascertain, or were there any functioning cameras that would have recorded driving that day?
No, the Department of Transportation, you see cameras all over Cobb County. The only cameras that record at those intersections actually record would be red light cameras. The DOT cameras don't record. They're just for live viewing, for the monitors, the operators to look at and see what traffic conditions are, at that time at that area.
Okay. And would there have been any way to get did you get any recordings, or were there any recordings that you could obtain?
No, there were no recordings that we could contain.
Okay. Also with Acres Mill, that shopping center where later that afternoon the car ended up, did you check to see if there were cameras that had any recordings or anything there?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to find any cameras or any types of recordings from those establishments that would have shown anything in the
No,
case?
there's no recordings that would show what was happening at that scene.
All right. Let's start, since the day starting with the defendant leaving his home with Cooper and going to Chick-fil-A. About how far is it from the defendant's home to that area?
I believe it was 6 miles.
Okay. And if I showed you a map, overhead map, would it help you in explaining to the jury where these locations were and how far some of them were as opposed to others?
Yes.
And I'd ask permission for the detective to step down.
You know,
So this east one. Got it right here. You did. Okay, detective, ask you, you can step to that side, and I'll step over here. Okay, what was the address of the defendant's home?
1212 Winds Ridge Circle, all the way up here.
Is this what I'm pointing at with this pointer?
That's correct.
Okay, and what type of home was it that he lived in? Was it a house, an apartment, or something different?
Like apartments, condos.
Okay. So looking at this area, the Chick-fil-A, Little Apron, Home Depot, was his house significantly farther away from this area?
It was.
Okay, so when he would drive down here, he would have a much further drive in the morning from home to this area than from, say, Chick-fil-A to work?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let me see. You stated it was about 6 miles from there down to this area. About how long does it take to get that from there to that area, depending on traffic?
Depending on traffic, it could take up to 20 minutes.
Okay. And sometimes if traffic was bad, maybe even longer.
And if it was really bad traffic, it would be even longer.
Now, from here, from the Chick-fil-A, and if you take the U-turn and go to the treehouse, about how far is that?
That's 0.6 miles.
Okay. So that's only 0.6 miles from here to here. Okay, and is the route significantly less as far as time from here to here?
That's correct.
And here being Chick-fil-A, the other here being Home Depot Treehouse.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna take this down, I'm gonna put up another aerial. And for the record, that was states 232. Gonna publish now States Exhibit 230. Okay. Detective, showing you States Exhibit 230, as we go here with the Chick-fil-A, would that be the Chick-fil-A depicted right there?
It would.
Okay. And the route that the defendant took, would it be traveling down this way, and then what is here?
That's going to be the U-turn?
Okay. And then coming back up this way to the treehouse?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And that's the 0.6?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as you make the U-turn, how do you go to Little Apron Academy?
You make the U-turn, you come up to Paces Ferry, you take a left turn on Paces Ferry.
And then you come down to, is it to that area, and then you turn in,
That's correct.
and then go in, and Little Apron's right here?
That's correct.
Okay. You can have your seat. So on the mornings that the defendant would be driving from home directly to Chick-fil-A, it would be 15, 20-minute drive, 6 miles there.
Correct.
Okay. Can you describe to the jury, I think we've heard it a little bit before, but you've been to the Chick-fil-A and have you made that route and driven that route before?
I have.
Okay. Describe to the jury first, just in your own words, how is it that you make that turn and then get to the U-turn?
You take a right turn on Chick-fil-A. You're taking a right turn on Cumberland. You got to get over very quickly. So you go all the way over to the left. You get into that little lane. It's a turn into Home Depot, the actual store, not the corporate support center or treehouse, but the actual Home Depot store, one of their boxes. You make that U-turn. And since you make that U-turn, you got to get over to the left again so you can make that left onto Paces Ferry.
And is this all within eyeshot? You're sitting there at Chick-fil-A. Can you see this entire area just in your eyesight?
You can.
Okay. as you're going, once you turn right from Chick-fil-A and try to get over to get into the U-turn lane, where are you getting traffic from as far as being at that U-turn to turn?
When you're sitting in that U-turn, you get ready to turn, you got traffic coming up from the Publix, you got traffic coming also from that Home Depot, and traffic's coming at a pretty good clip down that hill. We're right up towards you.
And as you're sitting there at the U-turn, are there also cars sometimes trying to come from your right and come across and turn left onto Cumberland?
That's correct, coming down from Publix area.
And we talked about the time he was walking out, I believe you said 9:33 a.m., walking out of the Chick-fil-A.
Correct.
What time was it? Is there video depicting the defendant's car first coming into the parking lot?
There is.
At the treehouse?
There is.
And what time is that first video of the defendant coming up the side there into the parking lot?
Very first video of him coming up in the side, the rides from the road is going to be at 9:24, 42 seconds a.m.
And we'll see these videos in a little bit, but is it sometime after that he actually finally parks the car and gets out? Is that and gets into the building? Is that a couple of minutes?
It's about a minute. Oh, yes.
And actually getting into the
Yeah,
building?
yes, I'm sorry. Correct.
Now, in between the time that he gets in the car to leave Chick-fil-A, as far as our timeline, and then the time he pulls into Chick-fil-A, or to the treehouse, you talked earlier about him, some other messages in that whisper to the person talking about hating being married with kids.
That's correct.
Did he send additional messages to that person?
Yes.
Okay. And what were those messages?
At 9:24, 28 a.m., he finishes the whisper chat, "We both need that." And that was in response to, "I need a break from love."
And is he actually message 3, agreed, hug, we both need that?
Yes,
And are those 3 different messages?
they are.
And so the last of those 3 is at 9:24:28.
Correct.
So based on that timeline, where would the defendant have been while he was typing out those messages about his son and his family?
Cooper would have been in the car with him.
So it would have been in between the time he left and the time he left Chick-fil-A and he entered the treehouse.
That's correct.
All right, now, going back to the route a little bit, we discussed the route it would take to get to Little Apron, the route it would take to get to Chick-fil-A or to get to the treehouse from Chick-fil-A. Did you actually go back and, well, first of all, let me go back. The light that you get to, once you make that U-turn, do you come to a light?
Correct.
Okay, and what road is that?
Cases through.
Now, is there turn lanes and things like that?
Yes.
Okay, and which way is the turn lane?
The turn lane's to the left.
Okay, and is that the way that you have to go to get to Little Apron Academy?
That is correct.
Now, the decision you make, when you make that U-turn, how immediate does it have to be as to whether you go straight or go left?
It's almost instantaneous. Once you make that U-turn, you got to make that instant decision to stay in that lane and move over, to get into a turn lane and make that left to go all the way to Home Depot.
And generally, how long does it take, and we'll talk in detail about how you know this, how long generally does it take, once you leave the Chick-fil-A and you pull out onto Cumberland, to get up and make that U-turn and have to decide?
30, 40 seconds.
Now, early on in the case, I guess about a week after Cooper's death, did you go back and just drive the route?
I did.
Okay. And why did you drive the route?
We just wanted to do it. We needed a demonstrative aid to see how long it would take approximately for us to leave Chick-fil-A and to get to this work, what time frame we're looking at. We couldn't make it perfect. We did it on a Wednesday. We did it around the same time. But we left from the front of the Chick-fil-A. I didn't go into the Chick-fil-A parking lot and bother their customers. We stayed on the outside. And we drove it, I think, 4 or 5 times?
Okay.
5 times.
And so on that occasion, you're trying to get an approximation of the route and how long generally it takes.
That's all we wanted. It was just something for demonstrative purposes to say it's about this amount of time.
Okay. Now, the best approximation, the timeline we actually have from when he's leaving Chick-fil-A and when he gets to Home Depot and things like that.
Correct.
Okay. So when you did that route, what day of the week was it?
It was on a Wednesday.
Is that the same day of the week that Cooper died?
Yeah, it's a week to the day.
And what time of day did you run these routes?
Around between 9:14 and 9:39 in the morning.
Okay. Now, just to make sure we're clear here about how you got your times and from what point to what point on this occasion, what was your starting point?
Starting point was Chick-fil-A.
Okay, and so was this Chick-fil-A as you're leaving, going on to Cumberland?
Yeah, this was the Chick-fil-A as we were leaving, not inside the parking lot. If you kind of, there's a little access road that goes in, and you can either follow the access road, goes around to Publix, there's a Starbucks right there, and a Goodyear. And then, of course, the Chick-fil-A. And so what we would do is we just come in, we'd park right in front of the Chick-fil-A, not inside of it, and then just kind of go back out and run the route.
Okay. So as far as just getting the approximations back then, a week after the Cooper's death, this was just not accounting for anything inside the parking lot or the defendant walking out, strapping the kid in, anything like that, correct?
Nothing like that.
Okay. And what was your stopping point when you would stop the time, or for delineating how long it was?
We'd stop the point as we pulled up to the parking space where he parked that day on the 18th.
Okay. And when you were timing that, did you account for him pulling past it, backing up, pulling in, or anything like that?
We did not. We just pulled up to it, we stopped the time, turned around, and we went back and did it again.
All right. Did you record, to refresh your memory, did you record the times that you drove, like the time of day you started it, and then the amount of time it took you to get from exiting the parking lot onto Cumberland to that parking spot?
I did. Detective Murphy accompanied me, and all the times were taken by him and written down.
Okay. So tell the jury, what was the first time that you actually started driving, and how long did it take you?
First time we left at 09:14 or 9:14 a.m., and it took 2 minutes and 13 seconds.
All right. What was the second time?
Second time we left at 9:20, and that was 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
The third time?
9:26, we arrived at in 2 minutes and 41 seconds.
Okay. Was there a fourth time?
There was a fourth at 9:33. We left Chick-fil-A. We arrived at 2:48 seconds.
And was there a fifth time?
Yep, and the fifth time we left at 9:39. We arrived back at the Home Depot at 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
Now, at this point, did you visually record your path or anything like that the week after?
No, we did not.
Okay. At some point, did you get the assistance of somebody, Eric Dustin, to actually drive the route and record it?
We did.
Okay. And did you actually drive the route? Were you the person doing that?
I did. Once again, Detective Murphy was with me in the car. That was on the 9th of March, 2016. We redrove the routes.
Okay. Now, what type of car did you use? Now, you weren't using the defendant's car to drive this route, right?
No.
Okay. What type of car did you use back in 2014?
Back in 2014, we reached out to CarMax. They allowed us to use one of their vehicles. We used the 2012 Hyundai Tucson.
All right. Was that the 2014 or the 2016 one?
I'm sorry, I'm getting, the 2016 one, we reached out and we used actual Hyundai. The 2014 one, we just used a Crown Vic, one of our detective cars.
So 2016, you tried to get something similar in nature.
That's correct.
Okay. And how was it recorded? What do you utilize to record, I guess, the path that you took?
In 2016, we used GoPro video. We set up a couple of GoPros, or Eric Dustin set up a couple of GoPros on the vehicle, and that's what we used to document our routes.
And did this have cameras, one inside and one outside the car?
That's correct.
And who was driving the car?
I was.
And did you follow the speed limit and things like that?
I did.
Okay. Now, in addition to this, the one that was recorded being a couple of years later, a little less than 2 years later, was there anything different based upon the time of year?
School is in session, and when school's in session, traffic is normally worse.
Okay. And in these videos, did you actually start from the parking lot of Chick-fil-A and record that time?
We did. This time we actually parked in one of the parking spaces in the Chick-fil-A lot, and then recorded it from there all the way over to the Treehouse, 2600 Cumberland. And then we kind of would, a couple of the videos, I believe one or two, I'd back up right where, the defendant parked his vehicle in the morning of the 18th.
So as opposed to the one in 2014, you actually have the time allotted for while driving in the Chick-fil-A parking lot?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, in regard to that 2014, the timings, in the GoPro videos 2016, do you actually get to the parking spot and then it still records a little bit longer.
That's correct.
Now, did you account in these times or anything like that, the time it would take for the defendant, after he's walked out of the Chick-fil-A, to walk over and put Cooper in the car seat and do all the things that he said he did on that interview that he
No.
claimed he did?
We did not.
So these times, they don't have that included.
No.
All right, I'm gonna show you what marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 437. Okay, detective, showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 437.
Okay.
Do you recognize State's Exhibit 437?
I do.
And how do you recognize that?
It's a Blu-ray disc. It says Harris GoPro Edit, and it's marked 88.
Okay. And have you reviewed that recently? And is that fair and accurate recording of the GoPro videos that were recorded on the day that y'all went out there to Chick-fil-A?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibit 437.
I just want to clarify one thing if I could, please. The recordings that are on that Blu-ray,
Yes, sir.
if I understood correctly, you did not create those, right?
No, sir.
Those were created by Eric Dustin,
That's correct.
and he's an independent contractor who was working with y'all.
To my knowledge, he received no monetary from this,
Okay.
from this actual event.
He's not a police officer.
He is not a police officer.
And he was the one driving the borrowed Tucson?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Who was driving the Tucson when those were created?
That was me.
You were driving.
Yes, sir.
All he did was hook the GoPros up.
That is correct.
Okay. And nobody else was in the vehicle with you?
Detective Murphy was in the car with me.
Okay. And your understanding is there's 3 separate routes on that list that you've identified?
I believe so. Well, there's from the Chick-fil-A to the Cumberland, from the Chick-fil-A to Little Apron, I did one time, I believe. And then, yes, sir, and then from Cumberland to Acres, I believe is also on there,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
And those are in the same state they were when you first saw them? They haven't been edited in any way?
I have not edited them in any way.
Or Eric Justin hasn't edited them in any way?
And what he put them on the disc, he gave me 2 discs. And he put all the information on the disc. I have no knowledge of him editing it, except for dead space before and after starting the vehicle and stopping it.
Okay, I'm not going to object then.
And so just to be clear, where this says edit, was the video running the entire time from there and back and there and back and there and back?
Yes, and it would start early, and it would start, we'd leave it, when I put it back up there, would, keep recording for a while. So, for clarity and for time, they were edited down.
Okay. And the actual raw footage, that was provided as well, so everybody would have a chance to look at it as well?
That's correct.
Okay. And just these videos, were these hooked up to basically see periphery or see to the side or anything, or are they just completely straight ahead?
They're just a GoPro video toward the front,
Okay.
the front of the vehicle.
Your Honor, permission to publish. Thank you. first I'm gonna show you or publish a video. You said you did one video from, and I'm just gonna do this on the inside camera, Chick-fil-A to gate. Is that from Chick-fil-A to the Little Apron Academy, the gate that you enter to get in there? Is that what this depicts and the route you would take?
That is correct.
And again, these are approximations. These aren't trying to say this is exactly what happened on June 8th.
Demonstrative purposes only. Treehouse. You'd be like when that car just passed by, you just continue straight to go to the treehouse. Left takes you to Home Depot. And Little Apron Academy, which is on the same continent.
What is the road that this is passing over now that you get on Paces Ferry?
Interstate 285.
Just for the record, the sound's off, but the video is still rolling. Trip is still playing. Sorry, I'm gonna back that up and pause it. It looks like the video, something buffered on it, and it just stopped and then picked back up in the middle. Okay. Back up at. What time that is? 244. The same thing. Now, when you play this through the laptop, does it usually do this? Okay. So just for the jury, where do you go, which way do you go to Little Apron Academy down this road, and what turns do you have to take?
You're gonna go down this road, past the interstate. Once you cross over the interstate, you're gonna take a right turn into the Home Depot complex, campus, I believe they want it called, and then another right turn. So it's gonna be a right turn onto the road at the campus, and then a right turn to go through security to get into Little Apron Academy and the store support center.
And once this picks up, is that road going down toward it?
That's correct.
So to take at the end of that video, after you've gone to the gate, turned around, that's 4 minutes and 24 seconds.
That's correct.
Okay. These next videos, I'm going to try to open up the Windows Media Player and see if it will play better on that. When it says outside, is that basically just the same route but outside camera
Correct.
recording? Okay. Now I'm going to open up Chick-fil-A work inside one. Play that. Doesn't look like their Windows Media Player is up to date on the Mondo pad, so we'll try this to be LN again. just past the space that the defendant's car would have been on June 18th.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm gonna go back it up just a little bit, get you to point out where it is.
It'll be that first car on the right.
That one right there?
Yes, sir.
So that video drive from parking lot was 4 minutes and 18 seconds.
Correct.
Okay. Now, how many, we had 3 other routes that you did in this regard from this location to the treehouse, from Chick-fil-A to treehouse?
Correct.
And when you were looking at these, was there about an average amount of time that it took from you pulling out of the Chick-fil-A parking lot onto Cumberland and to the point that you would make the U-turn and come back to where you got to that, the decision to make a left turn or go straight?
About 30 to 40 seconds. We'll say 40 seconds.
How many more minutes of those do you have?
We've got 3 more. They're approximately 4.5 minutes each, and then one last one that's about 4.5.
Let's take a morning recess. Ladies and gentlemen, close your notepads, keep an open mind, no discussion. Enjoy your break.
Let's all rise for the jury, please. Please watch your step going down.
Let's take our recess.